Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back for the second half of today's upload. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description below. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. And we have way too much to discover. So let's do this, shall we? So we all have heard the rumors or the myth or the truth about the elite, the Germans, being in Antarctica. Well, I have some information that I really want to share with you guys because it pretty much knocked me off my feet. And I hope you guys enjoy it as well. With the current mysterious happenings in Antarctica concerning Lake Vostok, an old theory is being resurrected that German Nazis, as early as the 1930s, may have built a secret base at the South Pole. While this idea undoubtedly will strike people as absurd, there is tantalizing evidence to suggest that something along this line may have truth to it. Long-standing banking and business connections allowed high-ranking German leaders in 1944 to forge a formidable Nazi-controlled organization for post-war activities. In researching the shape of totalitarian control during the century, there were plans of Nazi manifestly did not die with the German loss of World War II. The ideas and many of the principal players survived and flourished after the war and have had a profound impact on post-war history and on events taking place today. Orvis A. Schmidt, the United States Treasury Department's Director of Foreign Funds Control in 1945, offered this description of a Nazi flight capital program. The network of trade, industrial, and cartel organizations have been streamlined and intermeshed, not only organized, but also by what has been officially described as personnel union. Legal authority to operate this organizational machine has been vested in the concerns that have major capacity in the key industry, such as those producing iron, coal, steel, and basic chemicals. These concerns have been deliberately welded together by exchanges of stock to the point where a handful of men can make policy and other decisions that affect us all. Could one of those decisions have been the creation of a Nazi base connected to the development of UFOs? While this notion may superficially appear to be sheer nonsense, the public record offers compelling, if incomplete, evidence to support the idea. One theory is that Martin Bormann and other top Nazis escaped to South America and onto a secret base in Antarctica where they built UFOs so sophisticated that their secret Nazi empire has exerted significant control over world events and governments to this day. While there can be no question that the business and financial network created by Bormann wields a certain amount of power even today, evidence for the existence of a major Nazi base containing UFOs is virtually non-existent, consisting primarily of the known exploration of Antarctica's Queen Maud Land, renamed Neuschwanstein by the Germans in 1938, and some unverified statements. Reportedly, German Navy Grand Admiral Karl Donatz stated in 1943, the German submarine fleet is proud of having built for the Fuhrer in other part of the world a Shangri-La on land, an impregnable fortress. And it has been reported that the United States Admiral Richard Byrd, upon his return from the expedition to Antarctica in 1947, stated it was necessary for the United States of America to take defensive actions against enemy air fighters which come from the polar regions, and that America could be attacked by fighters that are able to fly from one pole to another with incredible speed. Advancing the idea that the Nazis continually shipped men and material to the South Pole throughout the war years, author R.A. Herbenson wrote, regarding the possibility of the Germans building self-sufficient underground research factories in Antarctica, it has only to be pointed out that the underground research centers of Nazi Germany were gigantic feats of construction containing wind tunnels, machine shops, assembly plants, launching pads, supply dumps, and accommodation for all who worked there, including adjoining camps for slaves, and yet very few people knew they existed. But while tales of the secret Nazi base in Antarctica may appear plausible to some, the idea that warm water location at the South Pole has remained undiscovered and no one has escaped or deserted the place in more than 50 years stretched belief to the breaking point in years past. But with new revelations of 60 to 70 degree temperature water magnetic anomalies suggesting the possibility of a hidden city or base and the obvious back out taking place concerned current events at the pole, and idea of secret bases no longer so far-fetched. Rumors began to circulate that while Germany had been defeated, a selection of military personnel and scientists had fled the fatherland as Allied troops swept across mainland Europe and had established themselves at a secret base on Antarctica's continent, from where they continue to develop their advanced aircraft technology. Furthermore, it is interesting to note that at the end of the war, the Allies determined that there were 250,000 Germans unaccounted for, even taking into account casualties and deaths. Could Neuenschwabeland have been a permanently manned German base at the time? The brackish water of the warm 30-degree lakes virtually confirmed that all had an outlet to the sea and would thus have been a haven for U-boats. The two ice-free mountain ranges in New Schwabenland presented no worse an underground tunneling project for the organization TAD than anything they had encountered and overcome in Norway. The Germans were the world's experts at building and inhabiting underground metropolises. At the end of the war, the United States gave anything concerning Ohrdruf a top-secret classification for 100 years upwards. The fact that there had been substantial underground workings and Ohrdruf was the location of the last redoubt was concealed absolutely. Foreseen for researchers, in 1962, the DDR had taken sworn depositions from all local residents during an investigation into wartime Ohrdruf, and upon the reunification of the two Germanys in 1989, these documents became available to all and sundry at Arnstad Municipal Archive. From Arnstad documents, it is clear that Charite and Lag unit operated in a 3-story underground bunker with floors 70 by 20 meters. When working, the device emitted some kind of energy field which shut down all electrical equipment and non-diesel engines within a range of 8 miles. For this reason, even through Ohrdruf was crawling with SS and was never photographed from the air nor bombed. Declassified United States Air Force documents dated early 1945 admit the existence of an unknown energy field over Frankfurt, Maine, and other locations, which, fantastic though it may appear, were able to interfere with our aircraft engines at 30,000 feet. Ohrdruf, rebuilt below New Schwabeland, during the last 2 years of war would have not been difficult, and since Charite Anglais had the highest property of anything in the Third Reich, it seems likely that it must have been. Such a base would have been impregnable, for the suggestion is that the force field worked in various ways favorable to the occupants. Scary secrets of the Third Reich base in Antarctica. A remarkable event in 1999 occurred, but only specialists paid adequate attention to it. A research expedition discovered a virus in Antarctica. At that, neither people nor animals had immunity to this virus. After all, Antarctica is far away. For this very reason, the virus cannot be dangerous for the rest of the planet, especially since the dangerous discovery was deep within the permafrost. However, scientists say that against the background of global warming threatening the Earth, the unknown virus can cause an awful catastrophic event on the planet. Expert Tom Starmuir from the University of New York also shares this pessimistic forecast with his colleagues. We don't know what mankind will face in the South Pole in the nearest time due to the global warming. It is not ruled out that an unbelievable catastrophe may break out. Viruses protected with a protein cover survive even in permafrost. As soon as the temperature gets warmer, they will immediately start reproducing. American scientists treated Antarctic discovery very seriously and even organized a special expedition that currently tests the ice for unknown viruses in order to develop an antidote in good time. What is the source of the virus in Antarctica, where only penguins survive in the ice? There is no answer to the question. Specialists are at a loss, however. Several theories concerning the problem have put it forward. A majority of scientists have inclined to believe a prehistoric form of life probably survived in the permafrost, but some specialists blame bones of the Third Reich for delivery of the secret developed bacteriological weapon of Antarctica, and this theory arose not in a vacuum. It is known that already in 1938, Nazis suddenly became interested in Antarctica. They organized 2 expeditions to the area, 1938 through 1939. At first, planes of the Third Reich took detailed pictures of unexplored territories, and then they dropped several thousand of metal peons with swastikas there. The whole of the explored territory was called Neuenschwaben and is considered part of the Third Reich. After the expedition, Captain Richter reported to Field Marshal Göring. The planes dropped the peons 25 kilometers apart. We covered the area of about 8,600 square miles. 350,000 square miles of them were photographed. In 1943, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz dropped a remarkable phrase. Germany's submarine fleet is proud that it created an unaccessible fortress for the Fuhrer on the other end of the world. It highly likely means the Nazis were building a secret base in Antarctica within 1938 through 1943. Submarines were mostly used for transportation of necessary freight to the place, as specialists for the Third Reich wrote. At the end of World War II, the submarines were revived of their torpedo arms in the port of Kiel and then loaded with containers with different goods. The submarines also received passengers whose faces were hidden behind surgical bands. Willem Bernard was commander of one of these submarines, U-530. The submarine left the port at Kiel on April 13, 1945. When it reached the shores of Antarctica, 16 members of the crew built an ice cave and put boxes into the cave. It is said that the boxes contained relics of the Third Reich, including Hitler's documents and personal stuff. The operation was codenamed Valkyrie II. When the operation was over on July 10, 1945, the submarine U-530 entered the Argentinian port of Mar del Plata and surrendered to authorities. It is also supposed that another submarine from the formation U-977 under the command of Heinz Schaefer delivered the remains of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun to Neuschwaben. It followed the route of the U-530 submarine and called at Antarctica. The submarine arrived at the Mar del Plata on August 17, 1945. But the version of Willem Bernard and Heinz Schaefer saying that the submarines delivered relics to Antarctica shores, both captains told it at the interrogations held by American and British intelligence service, seems rather dubious. It is unlike that the serious operation was designed only for the sake of delivery of Third Reich documents and relics. Later, Special Services seized a confidential letter from Captain Schaefer to his friend Captain Willem Bernard, who obviously planned to publish his memoirs. The letter was dated with June 1st, 1983. It runs as follows. Dear Willie, I was thinking if it is reasonable to publish your manuscript concerning the U-530. 3 submarines that took part in the operation, U-977, U-530, and U-465, are currently at the bottom of the Atlantic. Isn't it better to leave them there? My old friend, think about it. Think, please, how my book will look when you publish your memoirs. After World War II, Heinz Schaefer wrote a book called U-977. We all made an oath to keep the secret. We did nothing wrong. We just obeyed the orders and fought for our loved Germany and its survival. Please think again. Isn't it better to picture everything as a fable? What results do you plan to achieve with your revelations? Think about it, please. Even 40 years after the events, Heinz insisted that Bernard mustn't say the truth. It is possible that the submarines delivered something more dangerous to that continent, not Hitler's documents. Could it be a biological weapon, traces of which were discovered in Antarctica as unknown viruses in the permafrost last year? New Berlin. If you had been a soldier at the bombed-out railroad station in Poltava, a city in the Ukraine, during the summer of 1942, you may have seen a very strange-looking military unit on the march, heading for a waiting passenger train. The unit consisted of women, all of them blonde and blue-eyed, between the ages of 17 and 24, tall and slender, their sensational figures encased in a striking sky-blue uniform. Each woman wore an Italian-styled garrison cap, an A-line skirt with the hem below the knee, and a form-fitting jacket with the insignia of SS. You might have thought the SS had recruited a platoon of high-class call girls, but the truth was far stranger than that. You would have been looking at the Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler's latest brainstorm, the Antarctic, actually in English, Antarctica Statement Woman, or ASF. The story actually begins in 1938 when the German seaplane carrier Schwablen sailed across the South Atlantic, bounded for Queen Maud's land in Antarctica. According to Russian UFOologist Konstantin Ivanko, the Schwabland sailed to Antarctica, commanded by Albert Richter, a veteran of cold weather operations. The Richter expedition scientists used their large Dornier seaplanes to explore the polar wastes, emulating Admiral Richard E. Byrd's efforts a decade earlier. The German scientists discovered ice-free lakes heated by underground volcanic features and were able to land on them. It is widely believed that the Schwabenland's expedition was aimed at scouting out secret bases of operations. The German base was established in the Molig-Hoffmann Mountains, just inland from the Princess Astrid coast. The area is renamed Neuschwaben, and the base was known only as Station 211. From the movie Schindler's List, people have gotten an idea that killing Jews was the Nazis' main concern, but in actual fact, Hitler and the SS were just as ruthless with the rest of the population of their Eastern European empire, thinking nothing of shuffling large numbers of people around in their quests for a more perfect Aryan race. This shuffle was accomplished by a little-known office of the SS called the the German for Race and Settlement Bureau. In the Ukraine alone, the German for Race and Settlement Bureau drafted 500,000 women and forced labor in munition factories of Nazi Germany. The RUSHA, or German for Race and Settlement Bureau, which selected women of Himmler's unit, the Antarctic Settlement Women, or ASW. About half of the recruits were Volksdeutsche ethnic Germans, whose ancestors had settled in the Ukraine in the 17th and 18th century. The others were native Ukrainians, who the German for Race and Settlement Bureau had upgraded to full Aryans. This process was called Germanization. According to Evenko, there is increased popularity for the idea of a German-Slavic Antarctic Reich. It is said that 10,000 of the racially most pure Ukrainians out of 500,000 deported in 1942 by Martin Bormann were transported to the German Antarctic base during World War II in the proportion of 4 Ukrainian women to 1 German man. If true, this would mean that Himmler transferred 2,500 Waffen-SS soldiers who had proven themselves in combat on the Russian front to Station 211, now Neuschwaben, in Antarctica. This may be the source of the myth of the last SS battalion. The ASF training camp was set up in Estonia on a peninsula near Ristana on Himula Island in the Baltic Sea. It was a combination of finishing school and boot camp where the ladies took lessons in charm housekeeping along with their courses in polar survival. Himmler kept the existence a closely guarded secret for unhappy campers. The only escape consisted of a one-way ticket to Auschwitz. There is one known instance of an ASF deserter in 1943. Auschwitz guard Irma Gries, 22, the off-and-on girlfriend of Dr. Joseph Mengele, took to wearing a sky blue ASF uniform which she had scavenged from a pile of inmate clothing. Gries was hung in 1946 for war crimes. The uniform's original owner must have had serious second thoughts about the permanent move to Antarctica. The failure of Grouse Admiral Karl Dunetz's U-boat offensive by May of 1943 freed up dozens of milk cow U-boats. These were large submarines, almost as big as a tramp steamer, which Dunetz had used to supply his U-boat wolf packs in remote sea of the world. Himmler now put them to work carting supplies and personnel to Antarctica. Himmler's rationale for sending thousands of settlers to Antarctica could only be understood within the context of his mystical beliefs. As a result of his youthful reading of New Age books, his association with the occultist Dr. Friedrich Wischel, and his membership in the Artemin, Himmler became a believer in the Hindu concept of world ages or yogas. He believed that the current age of Kali Yuga would end in a global cataclysm, thereby giving birth to the new world age called Satya Yoga. By sending the Nazi colony to Antarctica, Himmler was assuring that the remnant of pure Aryan race would survive the coming cataclysm with the society and culture intact. They would then take possession of Antarctica, when the cataclysm melted the solar polar ice cap. According to the believers, the New Schwabenland colony survived not only the end of World War II, but a full-on battle with 3,500 Marines and aircraft in Operation Highjump. In 2003, Ivanko wrote, "Total population of Nazis in Antarctica now exceeds 2 million, and that many of them have undergone plastic surgery in order to move about with greater ease through South America and conduct all manner of business transactions." He called the Antarctic Reich one of the most military powerful states in the world because it can destroy the United States several times over with its submarine-based nuclear missiles, remaining itself invulnerable to the U.S. nuclear strikes because of the 2-mile thick ice shield. Further, he claims that the city of New Berlin, the colony's capital, sprawls through narrow subglacial tunnels under an unnamed mountain range heated by volcanic vents. The UFOologist also makes the claim that New Berlin adjoins the prehistoric ruins of Kadath, which may have been built by settlers from the lost continent of Atlantis well over 100,000 years ago. Still, other fringe researchers claim that the actual ruins of Atlantis have been found and possibly reoccupied underneath the Antarctic ice. Some say Atlantis is located near one of the 70 or so warm water lakes that have been discovered miles beneath the polar ice sheet, such as Lake Vostok near the Russian base at the pole of inaccessibility. Another of the oft-made claims of New Berlin is that the city is or has an alien quarter where Pleiadians, Zeta Reculians, Reptoids, Men in Black, and other visitors from Stardwell. As we have seen, the Nazis were working with some very advanced aircraft, some of which may have been capable of leaving Earth's atmosphere. Some researchers are convinced that Nazis did indeed make it to the moon and even Mars. Could they have made contact with space aliens once they left Earth? Or could their rockets, Foo Fighters, and disc aircraft have attracted aliens to visit them? A claim floats around in the modern UFO lore that the extraterrestrial craft with anti-gravity propulsion crashed in Schwarzwald, in the summer of 1936 and was recovered by the Nazis, who back-engineered it, thus explaining their flying saucer program. This parallels stories of the similar recovered crashed saucer near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. The American-backed engineering of which supposedly led to the discovery of the transistor patented by Bell Laboratories the following year, fiber optics, and other exotic technologies. Ivanko reported that talk about the Antarctic Reich is becoming more and more popular in Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and other countries in Eastern Europe. He writes, in the May 10th, 2003 issue of the newspaper Frankfurt Allgemein, Polish journalist I'm not going to attempt to say it, so I'll just put Stagjuk, criticized Poland's decision to send troops to Iraq to assist with Allied occupation. At the end, he said the next Polish government will sign a treaty with Antarctica and declare war on the United States. Ivanko added that Stagjuk's words were broadcast on the shortwave radio station Dushwell the same week. Some analysis compared this sentence to a famous code phrase which started wars in the 20th century, such as, over all of Spain, the sky is cloudless in 1936, and climb Mount Nikita in 1941. Climb Mount Nikita was to signal Admiral Yamamoto sent to Kido-Buta, the Imperial Japanese Navy fleet, to begin the attack on Pearl Harbor. It is strange to think of a large population living under the ice of Antarctica, totally divorced from mainstream world. Then again, there are Jivaro indigenous people living on Lago de Yanaka Lake, less than 50 kilometers, 30 miles east of Iquitos, Peru, who have never heard of Courtney Love. So, is there a city under the ice inhabited by the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the original U.S. or the original SS settlers? Or is it just an urban legend steaming from the chaotic conditions that prevailed in Europe during World War II? Someday, we may know for certain. NASA and the United States Navy conducted clandestine search of Antarctica. On December 30th, 1946, a United States Navy patrol plane with a crew of 9 mapped the Antarctic coast as part of a military effort called Operation Highjump, crashed in a snowstorm after its radar failed to detect a slope not shown on the charts. Now the United States Navy, piggybacking on scientific explorations of western Antarctica, has begun an effort to locate the plane and recover the remains of the crew members who died. The crew members and their plane were part of what remains to this day the largest expedition ever in Antarctica. The crew members and their plane were part of what remains to this day the largest expedition ever in Antarctica, Operation Highjump, which was led by renowned polar explorer Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, consisted of 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and 4,700 men. According to a 1946 Navy memorandum, the mission's goal was consolidating and extending U.S. sovereignty over Antarctic areas, investigating possible base sites, and expanding scientific knowledge in general. With the Cold War turning more frigid by the month, the venture unnerved the Soviet Union. The Soviet whaling fleet had just begun plying Antarctic waters, and a military publication called Red Fleet warned darkly that the operation was proof American military circles are seeking to subject the polar regions to their control. Argentina and Chile were none too happy either. Both countries had their own overlapping claims to areas extending from the tip of South America. Their fears of the American incursion were heightened when Chile asked Washington's permission to send an observer along, but was turned down. In their books written in 1970s, Willem Hendig and outcast UFOologist Ernest Zundel claimed that Operation Highjump was literally the last battle of World War II. The secret Nazi polar expeditions 1978 and Hitler at the South Pole 1979. Zundel claimed that SS Heinrich Himmler had founded the SS colony in Antarctica called Neuschwaben. The base, known as Point 211, eventually became the Antarctic Reich. Opinion is sharply divided about the final fate of Neuschwaben. Some argue that the Nazis abandoned their Antarctic sanctuary in the 60s to move to the Andes. Another group claims that the Antarctic Reich still exists and has grown into a civilization under the ice, home for about 3 million people of German and Ukrainian descent. It is supposed to be somewhere in the Malig-Hoffman Mountains, adjacent to the ruins of Kadath, a city founded by settlers from the lost continent of Atlantis. Some believe that Adolf Hitler escaped from Berlin in April of 1945, traveled to southern Argentina in a U-boat, and from there traveled to Neuschwaben in a Nazi flying saucer. Hitler supposedly lived in Antarctica until 1952, when he reportedly traveled to the moon and met with aliens from space. These aliens took him to Aldebaran, 68 light years from Earth, according to the legend. Someday Hitler will return with the Aldebarani Space Armada. In November 27th, 2004, the Navy undertook an initial flight to try to locate the wreckage of George 1, the plane that crashed in 1946. The search flight was a joint one conducted aboard a Chilean Navy Orion P-3 aircraft, and a Chilean crew and NASA scientists worked together. This wasn't just a routine task for us, said Captain Christian Albanet, a senior Chilean pilot in the recovery flight. It was a challenge to find clues that could help locate the plane, even though we knew it would be almost impossible to get at it because of the ice snow that had piled up over so many years. During the 11-hour flight from and back to Punta Arenas, in the extreme south of Chile, the search plane dipped as low as 500 feet over the Thurston Island so scientists could use radar and laser beams to try to locate the remains of the United States Navy PBM Martin Mariner seaplane. Even today, it's not easy, but we can rely on information from satellite photos, GPS systems, and wind predictions, Albanet said, referring to global positioning networks. But from the time they took off until the time they arrived in the area, they had no idea what to expect. Though little known in the outside world, the three men who died in 1946 crash, Wendell Henderson, Maxwell Lopez, and Frederick Williams, are still celebrated in Antarctica as heroes. At the McMurdo Station, the United States research base on the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf, there is a plaque to honor the men, the first Americans to die on any of Byrd's many expeditions. See the Duluth, Minnesota News Tribune for January 2nd, 2005. Navy tries to find plane lost in Antarctica 58 years ago. There are lines of magnetic force emanating from the South Magnetic Pole. What is strange about the North and South Poles is the way in which each magnetic line of force moves. The magnetic line of force originate from a hole just off the coast of Antarctica. There are Chilean and Peruvian scientists' bases near or along the route of UFOs emanating from inside the Earth. What's interesting about this potential UFO route is the UFOs coming from inside the Earth would end up flying over the America South Pole base. However, the line of flight is such that only places in Antarctica where you'd stand a chance of seeing these UFOs is in the Weddell Sea area where the South American countries have their bases, and at Scott Base at the South Pole. The other parts of the UFO route is somewhat offset from the commonly traveled routes, and so there is little chance of running into UFO by accident at any other place. That would explain why the U.S. government doesn't like visitors at the South Pole base. It's not that the hole is at or near the South Pole base, as we originally thought, but along the route from the real hole in the oceans off the coast. Bob Borneo, in his article, UFO Bases Found in Antarctica, Globe, January 18, 1983, quotes from certain scientists who believe that subterranean UFO base is located beneath the strange Polyana Sea in Antarctica's Weddell Sea region. The French agency France Presse on the 25th September 1946 said, "The continuous rumors about the German U-boat activity in the region of Terra del Fuego between the southernmost tip of the Latin America and the continent of Antarctica are based on true happenings." The newspaper France Soir had the following account: almost 1.5 years after cessation of hostilities in Europe, the Icelandic whaler Juliana was stopped by a large German U-boat. The Juliana was in the Antarctic region around Malvinas, now Falkland Islands, when a German submarine surfaced and raised the German official Navy flag of mourning, red with a black edge. The submarine commander sent out a boarding party which approached the Juliana in a rubber dinghy, and having boarded the whaler, demanded that Captain Hecla part of his fresh food stocks, and request was made in a definite tone of an order to which resistance would have been unwise. The German officer spoke correct English and paid for his provisions in US dollars, giving the captain a bonus of $10 for each member of the Juliana crew. While the foodstuffs were being transferred to the submarine commander informed Captain Hecla of the exact location of large schools of whales. Later, the Juliana found a school of whales where designated. To address that 1947 story, to this day there has never been any Icelandic whaler in the South Atlantic, let alone in Antarctica. No Icelandic ship has ever been named Juliana, and Hekla is an active volcano in Iceland, not a last name. 99% of all Icelandic last names for males end in son. The Hitler in Argentina tale is an old one. It first surfaced in a book by Sabo entitled Hitler es Vivo, Spanish for Hitler is Alive, back in 1947. The second book by Michael Barton was published in 1969 entitled We Want You, Is Hitler Alive? Then Ernest Zundel took up the banner in 1974. Out of these books has sprung the saucer Nazi theory. Both theories agree that Hitler escaped from the Führerbunker in Berlin and fled to Argentina in a U-boat. However, believers in the Antarctic Reich theory contend that Hitler left Argentina in the early 50s and moved to New Schwabland, an SS colony under the ice of Antarctica, right next to prehistoric ruins of Kadath. Here they say Adolf lived out his life, resuming his artistic career and painting a series of Antarctic icescapes. Prior to World War II, German scientists were obsessed with Antarctica. Far from finding a desolate wasteland covered with ice, the Germans discovered ice-free areas, warm water lakes, and cavern systems. The following passage refers to a German efforts to claim a region in Antarctica after Norwegian expeditions in the 20s and 30s. After these expeditions, the Germans also got interested in Queen Maud Land, or New Schwabland as referred to by the Germans, and planned an expedition to declare it as theirs. Anyway, it is still lying there as a remote ice shelf with lots of high mountains over the glacier. Truly a beautiful land. Queen Maud Land is dominated by a giant ice shelf flowing slowly from the King Haakon Plateau over the South Pole down to the ocean. This area is known as the mouth of the giant devil wolf in Norse mythology. According to this mythology, Fenris, the wolf teeth are very sharp, and they would kill all people on earth, according to Ragnarok, the end of the world. Most of the mountains have names with analogies to teeth or to parts of the Norse. The use of the wolf symbol is interesting as it touches upon the theme in Nazi symbolization, which used a wolf as a totem of the hunter-killer. Hitler's retreat in Bavaria was nicknamed Wolfslayer, and the tactic used by German U-boats to defeat convoys during the war was called Wolf Pack. Germany also had allies in South America and South Africa. Many Nazis fled to Argentina following the war, and South Africa resembled the Nazi state as racial minorities, including Indians as well as blacks, were subjected to apartheid. Hitler's dream was a 1,000-year Reich. Is this the thinly veiled counterpart to Jesus' millennial kingdom? Allied pilots reported seeing Foo Fighters during the latter stages of World War II. These craft appeared to have vanished at incredible speeds and created electrical and magnetic anomalies when close to Allied aircraft. These craft are similar to flying saucers that were reported initially in 1947. Nazi leaders were known for their obsession with the occult, including astrology and ancient relics. Remember the Indiana Jones movie that used Nazi quests for their holiest relics of Judeo-Christian faith? These movies are based on occult practices of the Nazis. One relic they were fascinated with was the Spear of Destiny that pierced Christ's side in Golgotha. The next movie in Indiana Jones series is tentatively titled Indiana Jones and the Lost Continent, in allusion to Atlantis. Hitler's corpse was never found. Recent reports of opened KGB files assert that Hitler's bones were kept and destroyed in Soviet intelligence, but the current incarnation of Russia is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and there is little faith in the KGB or FSB, its successor. UFO abductee Bernie Hill, who in 1960 was one of the first publicized abductees, claimed under hypnosis that one of his abductors looked like a German Nazi. Other abductees have claimed to see Nazi-style decorations or hearing German or German-accented voices as a part of their abduction experience. Under Operation Paperclip, Nazi scientists and intelligence officers were integrated into the military, NASA, and the intelligence community. Wiener von Braun is one of the most and is remembered for being a genius behind the Saturn rockets. The most infamous was Renard Glenn, a major general in the Nazi intelligence agency. Glenn was sponsored by the Dulles brothers. John Foster Dulles was a founding member of the CFR and served as President Eisenhower's Secretary of State. Allen was the president of the CFR and the director of the Central Intelligence, head of CIA, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Not only has the CIA been implicated in the assassination of JFK, Allen Dulles was a member of the Warren Commission. The investigative body, JFK researchers argue, was the government's official cover-up of conspiracy. German wealth was spirited out of Germany. The U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce, Stuart Eisenstadt, reported the following concerning the Nazi treasure. The evidence presented in this report. The Swiss National Bank, the private Swiss bankers knew as the war progressed, the Reichsbank, German central bank, own coffers had been depleted and that the Swiss were handling vast sums of looted gold. Transcript: Eisenstadt briefing on looted Nazi gold report, United States Department of Commerce, May 8, 1997. When World War II ended and Europe was being overrun by allies, the country in charge of each sector of Europe, in our sector, we backed trucks up to former production facilities and hauled off all documents. Everyone else did the same thing. Some 12 years later, the Australians discovered 16mm film, a technical report of German V7 research project. The V7 weapon research project involved circular disc-shaped craft. Now, we knew about program V1 through V4, but we had no previous idea about V7. The information in this document seemed to indicate that Germans built their first operational disc sometime in 1940 in the first production facility in Prague. Then they proceeded to expand their design, development, and research terms until the time the Germans were being driven back into Germany. They had 9 research facilities, all with projects under testing. They successfully evacuated 8 of these facilities out of Germany along with the scientists and key people. The 9th facility was blown up. Now this 16mm film showed some people pictures of flying vehicles in operation. We also knew that through intelligence, where I was working at the end of the World War, the Germans built 8 very large cargo submarines, especially built, and they were all commissioned. Launched and proceeded to disappear without a trace. To this day, we have no idea where they went. They are not at the bottom of the ocean or at any port we know of. It's a mystery, but mystery might have been solved by the Australian document film, which shows large German cargo submarines in Antarctica with ice floes all around them and crews standing on the deck waiting to tie up. Underground information that some of the research facilities in Germany were taken to the place called New Schwabland. Now, Germany was called Schwabland before it was called Germany. So, we are talking about New Germany, and it's located in an area at the South Pole formerly called Queen Maud Land. Back in 1937, we convened an international conference under the League of Nations at the time to decide to restrict new claims of land in Antarctica. At the time, everyone seemed to have a claim except Germany, who had not staked out a claim but only had a research going on down there. The whole thing was designed to keep Germany from making a land claim as the Nazis were coming to power. We refused to recognize German claims, which were shown on German maps. A couple of years ago, National Geographic showed the German claim on a map for the first time. But back in 1939, Göring led an expedition to Antarctica, including a submarine force, and took construction and digging equipment down there and began excavating a tunnel complex. And this activity might have been going on since that time. If that is the case, it could be sizably complex today. That may be where the big cargo submarines are. We believe that at least one or more of the disk research facilities were taken to Antarctica. We had information that one was taken to the Amazon and that the other was taken north to the north coast of Norway, where there is a strong German population. Those were taken into secretly maintained underground facilities. Before World War II, the Germans had military advisors all over South America, and when we got into the war, we persuaded countries in South America to give up the German advisors and accept American ones down there. They still prefer the Germans. They have never liked Americans. It is quite possible that some of this material and some of these research facilities were decentralized to South America as the German Empire began to collapse. Companies like IG Farben and the German subsidiary of General Electric opened large subsidiary plants in Rio and Sao Paulo in Brazil, and some of these new facilities became larger than they had been in Germany. So there have been support capability of disk research facilities. One has to wonder how much truth there really is to all of this. It appears that some of the craft we see today are nothing more than further developments of German disk technology. So we may in fact be visited periodically by Germans. One has to wonder how much we are observing is man-made and how much is truly extraterrestrial technology. Certainly, there is some of both, but do we know the percentage? Thousands of missiles fired by Russian and American forces over Earth's Arctic regions completely unannounced. Are we fighting extraterrestrial UFOs? India Daily staff reported April 14, 2005, report is reaching of strange behavior by American and Russian forces in the Earth's Arctic region. Completely unannounced, both the superpowers are launching thousands of missiles from both land-based and aircraft launched these missiles that are being directed out of the Earth's atmosphere into the outer space regions of our planet's atmosphere. From various news services, however, there is being reported that Russia and the United States are conducting missile defense war games. The valid question is, why was this separate military exercise not previously announced? Some UFO researchers believe that both forces are jointly fighting something they are not saying. There is also reports that someone is manipulating the Earth's weather system in a massive scale. Are American and Russians jointly fighting them? The cosmic bursts hitting the Earth are also strange. Solar flares in recent times have shown extreme abnormal behavior. The increasing earthquakes, floods, droughts, landslides may have been caused by some artificial agents. On the surface, the American and Russians are saying these missile launches are part of military exercises, but why are they unannounced? What triggered this massive launch of terrestrial missiles in the thousands? Secrets of the Third Reich. June 21st, 2006. Evidence of the use of extraterrestrial technology. One of the last great mysteries of the 20th century is the occult past of the Third Reich and membership of secret societies by some of its leading exponents. The question as to whether these people were aware of the existence of lost extraterrestrial technologies once applied by past advanced cultures is raised by completely new research supported by historical documents and original film footage of the period. Were disc-shaped flying objects driven by anti-gravitational forces actually constructed? Test pilots, engineers, and investigators explain the Nazi program for space travel and contact with aliens. Look up and look at the evidence yourself, guys. With that, please research. May the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path we call life.